I have noticed a lot of new players in Path of Exile, and therefore I decided to remake some videos which are aimed at new players. This doesn't mean you cannot learn something if you're a more seasoned player, but you're likely better at using the written sites for this kind of content. I'll be leaving links to written content on this subject in the video description. Flasks are very powerful in Path of Exile, and upgrading your flask to the next tier is done by vendoring 3 flasks of the same kind to any vendor, and back you get the next tier flask. Resistance are very important in Path of Exile, and you can trivialize some encounters like Merveil, the boss of Act 1, with a sapphire ring or 2. So if you don't find any sapphire ring on your way to her, you can craft one by using an iron ring and a blue colored gem. If you vendor them together, you'll be giving a sapphire ring. The same goes for an iron ring and a green gem or a red gem. You'll get a topaz ring or a ruby ring. Any item in the game that has 3 linked sockets with any combination of blue, green and red will, when sold to a vendor, give a chromatic orb in return. This is a very handy recipe because you'll probably need more than just what you find from monsters in order to optimize your skill gem setup. While leveling, you'll come across quite a few flasks that has % quality on them. Keeping these until you have enough flasks that you can sell a total of 40% quality flask to any vendor will in return give you a glassblower's bubble, which you will want to upgrade your endgame flasks with. This recipe is quite useful in mapping, as you're probably going to run out of chisels unless you're running in a group all the time. The recipe, you need 1 stone hammer or rock breaker or gavel. They have to have 20 quality, and then you can sell them with a map to a vendor, and back you get 1 chisel. The level of your skill gems greatly determine its effectiveness, and using a +1 scepter or wand when leveling is a must, and can even outperform a full-linked item. Therefore, this recipe is extremely good to know and should be used if you want a faster and better leveling experience. You need a magical scepter or wand, and you need an orb of alteration, and then you need a ring depending on what element you want to have +1 to, so either a ruby, topaz or a sapphire ring. To make a +1 chaos wand, you only need a magical wand and any chaos gem, and you can buy these from the vendor. If you're a necromancer by nature, then this recipe is good for you. Giving your little slaves a better chance against the enemy will of course benefit you, so look out for flasks with the suffix of animation when you're leveling, or maybe even try to craft one. Either way, a +1 level to minion gems helmet is great for summoners. You need a magical helmet, 1 orb of alteration, and of course a life flask with the suffix of animation on it. Then you can craft a +1 minion gem helmet. If you're not using either scepters or wands, I suggest you use this recipe with the best base within your reach. You need a blacksmith's whetstone, and you need an either magical or rare rustic sash. I only suggest using this recipe if you have more than 2 quicksilvers. You need an orb of augmentation, a white pair of boots, and a quicksilver flask. That will give you back a pair of boots with 10% movement speed on them. Magical. Next, there is a recipe that takes a magical or rare pair of boots with movement speed on them, and a quicksilver flask, and an orb of augmentation. That will give you back another pair of magical boots with the same movement speed on them as they had before you crafted them, plus 5% more. If you're so lucky and you have 3 different kinds of 2-stone rings, you can vendor them together and get back a prismatic ring. This recipe feels more useful than ever in Path of Exile 3.3 Incursion League. As you get a lot of Val gems from the temple, you get a lot of Val gems from the side areas, and what you need is 7 Val gems plus 1 sacrifice fragment, and when you vendor them together you get back 1 Val orb. There are a total of 5 chance orb recipes in Path of Exile, but only really one worth paying attention to. And that one actually feeds off the 6-linked recipe, because you want to look for mirrored boxes And what you need in this recipe is two exactly alike items, meaning they have to have the same name and they have to be the same rarity, and then when you're selling them together, you get back a chance orb. This is by far the most used endgame recipe, and it's oddly satisfying to use. Any 6-socket item you find will grant you 7 Jeweler's orbs if sold to any vendor in Path of Exile. You can find these from any monster able to drop item level 50 plus items. For the Chaos recipe, you need a full set of items with quality rare, and they all have to have the item level between 60 and 74. Then you can turn them into a vendor, and in return you get a Chaos Orb. For the un-ID'd Chaos recipe, you need exactly the same items as you would need for a Chaos recipe, but you cannot identify any of the items, and in return you get 2 Chaos Orbs instead of 1. This is another useful recipe when mapping. You can vendor any 3 maps with the same name, and you'll be giving back a map 1 tier higher. The map you get in return is not a random one. You can look up every single map online, or you can simply put 3 maps of the same kind in a vendor tab, and the vendor will show what you get in return. This is a great way to get a specific map, or if you have a lot of maps of the same kind you feel are too low tier to actually benefit from. If you sell a 6-linked item to any vendor, this recipe grants you a Divine Orb. But you might be wondering why anyone would do so. Well, there are a few cases. A very bad base dropping as a 6-link, or the by far most common case is selling corrupted 6-links. These can be obtained in many ways, but corrupting a strong box with the suffix of complexity, which grants the contained items have +1 to 2 additional sockets, or Calandra, which means the mirrored. This is a great way to obtain these items. Considering the price difference, it's a pretty good chance to take. The GCP recipe is a recipe where you take gems that have quality on them and vendor them. You need a total of 20 quality gems, and then in return you get 1 GCP. There are a lot of highly specific unique items in Path of Exile, hence the unique tag. For instance, there are these 4 staves, and on their own they don't really look that special, but if you combine them, they actually vendor for a unique map. This recipe is quite cool. You need 60 unique rings, and what you get in return is a unique armor law weave. If you are a new player and you don't use a loot filter yet, and you want to use these recipes, then I highly recommend that you download a loot filter from a place like Filterblade. I'm not affiliated with them, but I use it myself, and it makes identifying what you need to pick up much easier on a screen that is totally crowded by various items. Since this video is on the topic of recipes, I think I should include that there are a lot of recipes undiscovered. So you could look into this. Hopefully you can get lucky and find the next amazing recipe. Who knows? But I wouldn't count on it, but there should be some out there according to Grinding Gear Games.